allowed in for educational purposes if the sheriff allows it and providing they follow a few rules. You must be dressed appropriately. Football tops or t-shirts which may cause offence are definitely not allowed. Hats or caps must also be removed. You mustn't eat, drink or chew gum in the courtroom. When the court is in session, that means when the judge or sheriff enters the courtroom, you mustn't talk or read.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for your appearance today. Before I explain the practice and procedures of today's hearing, I'd just like to check who's here, so bear with me. Alex Purvis?
In order to be excused from jury service, a potential juror must have an important reason, such as a hospital appointment, or caring for young children, or an elderly relative. Excuses, such as being busy at work, will probably not be accepted.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. What you just observed is me putting the names in the bowl, and what will happen thereafter in a few moments when the sheriff comes on the bench is I will call the names out. It's a random choice. So if your name is called, please come forward and take a seat in the jury box, which is situated over there. If at any time you recognise someone in the proceedings, please let us know. It's an important step. If you recognise the accused or a witness, please let me know immediately. It may have a bearing on the case and your ability to sit on it. If there is anything else that you have to ask or any inquiries you need to make, then please let me know now. Thank you again for your attendance today.
The sheriff has to be in the court when a jury is selected. So when everyone is in place, the court officer is sent to the chambers to accompany the sheriff into court.
Come in.
Morning, Sheriff.
Morning, John.
How are you this morning?
I'm very well. Do you have a good weekend?
Not bad at all.
You ready for me?
Yeah.
The people waiting in the courtroom and the sheriff are currently fairly relaxed and able to chat informally. This will all change as soon as the sheriff enters the courtroom.
There you are. Can you take these for me, thank you?
Go round.
As acknowledgement of the important position that the sheriff represents, everyone must stand when the sheriff enters or leaves the courtroom. As a mutual mark of respect, the sheriff bows to the court and the court officials bow in return. The clerk of the court will now officially call the case and Darren will tender a plea.
Call the Diet, Her Majesty's Advocate against Darren Ballantyne. Can you come forward, please, Mr. Ballantyne?
An accused person may decide to change their plea from not guilty to guilty, even at this late stage. If they do, no jury or trial will be needed.
Darren Ballantyne? Yes, have a seat.
The process would proceed to the sentencing stage.
Yes, Milady, I appear for Darren Ballantyne, who pleads not guilty to the charge on the indictment.
Milady, I'd be obliged if the court can proceed to trial.
Ballot, milady. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, when I call your name, if I could ask you just to come forward and take a seat in the jury box. Number 12 on the list, David Wilson. Number 2, Christine Knox.
In Scotland, 15 people are required to serve on a jury. Some people are exempt or disqualified from jury duty, including those involved in the administration of justice, such as police officers or lawyers, and those who have been convicted of a serious criminal offence.
Suzanne Senior. Number 27, Duncan Robertson.
Once all 15 members of the jury have been chosen or impanelled, the clerk of the court will read out the indictment or charges against Darren, and the sheriff will address the jury.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'll now read the indictment to you, and after that I'll ask you to stand and raise your right hand. and at that stage I'll administer the oath to you, and I'll simply look for you to say "I do" once I've done that. So the charge against the accused is Darren Ballantyne of 4 Main Street, Edinburgh, indicted at the instance of Colin Boyd, Lord Advocate. The charge against him is that he did, on 13th June, in the premises at the High Street, Edinburgh, occupied by Superstore Groceries, you did assault Mary Jenkins, shop assistant, by slapping her on the face and rob her of £250. Can I ask you to stand, please, and raise your right hand? Do you swear by Almighty God that you will well and truly try the accused and give a true verdict according to the evidence? I do. Have a seat, please.
Mr Gilmer, would you hand copies of the indictment out to the members of the jury, please?
Each member of the jury will now receive a copy of the indictment. Throughout the trial, the jurors may receive further copies of important documents, such as witness statements or pieces of evidence. The sheriff will also receive a copy. The copies are often on colour paper to distinguish the copies from the original.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, you may not be familiar with the practices in this court, and it may be of some assistance if I outline the procedure that will be followed. Now, the case for the Crown is presented by the Procurator Fiscal, and that's the lady sitting on my right facing you. The case for the defence is presented by Mr Scott, who's the gentleman at the desk on my left, sitting with his back to you.
In Scotland, there are no opening speeches. The trial officially begins when the first witness for the prosecution takes their place in the witness box and takes the oath. As the Procurator Fiscal or Crown has brought the case to court, the whole of the prosecution case is heard first.
Procurator Fiscal, would you like to call your first witness, please?
I'm obliged, my lady. I propose to call witness number 1 for the Crown, Mary Jenkins.
Is it Miss Jenkins or Mrs Jenkins?
Mrs. Jenkins.
Will you take the oath, please? Just raise your right hand and repeat after me. I swear by Almighty God.
I swear by Almighty God.
That I will tell the truth.
That I will tell the truth.
The whole truth.
The whole truth.
And nothing but the truth.
And nothing but the truth.
Miss Dalrymple?
As this first witness is a witness for the prosecution, the Crown will ask questions first. The defence solicitor may then ask the witness some questions. This is called cross-examination. When the cross-examination has finished, the Crown may ask a few more questions to clear up some issues. The procedure is the same for defence witnesses, except the defence asks the questions first.
Now that everyone is in place, let's take a closer look at the people inside the courtroom, who they are and what their role is.
The witness box is where each of the witnesses will stand to give their evidence. It directly faces the jury to allow them to see the witness clearly. Although a chair is provided, most witnesses are required to give their evidence standing up to allow the jury to see the whole of the witness's body. The Procurator Fiscal will prosecute the case or present the case for the Crown. The accused is considered to be innocent until proven guilty. The prosecution has the burden of proof, which means that they need to present enough strong evidence to convince the jury that the accused is guilty of the crime. The defence solicitor sits on the right. It's the job of the defence team to test the prosecution case. The defence does not need to prove anything. Remember, it is the prosecution who has to prove guilt. The defence does not need to prove innocence. The defence may choose to present evidence to the court to support the defence case, but they don't need to. The clerk of the court is responsible for writing up procedural steps in each case, and advising the sheriff on procedure. Other duties include tape recording the proceedings, safeguarding the tapes, and ensuring whenever possible that the court runs smoothly. The court officer is responsible for bringing people in and out of the courtroom. He brings pieces of evidence to witnesses and generally helps the courtroom run smoothly. The sheriff is the master of the law. It is the sheriff's function to regulate the procedure of the case and to explain the law to the jury. You will notice that all these people are dressed in black gowns and that the sheriff is wearing a wig. This is a tradition that dates back many hundreds of years. Back then, the only people who could read and write were priests and ministers of the church, and so it was they who carried out much of the work of judges and legal advisors. It was only natural that they wore the same clothes in court as they did in church. To begin with, they carried out their legal work free of charge. But gradually, they began to demand payment. Many neglected their churches and concentrated instead on earning extra money through their legal work. The bishops decided to put an end to this and ordered the ministers not to ask for payment. To get round this, some ministers had their gowns made with small pockets at the end of the sleeves, into which clients would slip some money. The ministers could then honestly say to their bishop that they did not ask for any money, nor did they see anyone give them money. Angered by this, the bishops demanded that they stopped carrying out any legal work at all. But many were making a lot of money and didn't want to stop. But by wearing a wig, they were able to disguise the fact that they were ministers and were able to carry on. The tradition of gown and wig wearing continues in many countries to this day. The purpose of the jury is to judge the facts of the case. It is said that the jury is the master of the facts. They must decide if they find witnesses reliable and believable, and whether they think the Crown has provided enough evidence to prove that the crime was committed by the accused beyond reasonable doubt. It is extremely important that each member of the jury pays careful attention to all the evidence. Their verdict must be based on the evidence presented in court and nothing else. They are provided with pens and paper to allow them to take notes. Jurors must not talk about the case to anyone except their fellow jurors, and only then in the privacy of the jury room.
No juror should have any contact with an accused person, and it is a serious offence for anyone to try to obtain information from a juror about any of the matters discussed by the jury, even long after the trial has ended. Trials can often last many days, perhaps weeks, and in very complex cases, even months. Jurors are paid travelling expenses and an allowance for any money they might lose whilst not at work.
Members of the public, family, and those interested in the case sit here in the gallery. Some courtrooms have special areas for the press to sit. The accused sits here in the dock. The dock is directly connected to the cells underneath. For security reasons, police officers sit either side of Darren. No one is allowed to touch him or give him anything unless they've had permission from the sheriff.
In the next programme, we will look more closely at the role of the witness and the juror and watch as the trial reaches its conclusion.